Good evening, everyone. We'll get started. Thank you for your patience. This is the Planning and Development Committee meeting of Monday, January 8th. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We have a quorum, and the first item on the agenda is approval of the regular meeting minutes of November 27th.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. First, before we get started, I want to let everyone know that at 5:20 this afternoon, the developer for the 601 Davis property called the city staff and asked for a continuance until the next city council meeting, which would be January 22nd, 2 weeks from tonight. Our normal courtesy is to, when an applicant asks for a continuance, is to grant one. And so that is what we are going to do this evening. I know many people have taken the time to come out tonight because they believed that this item was going forward on the agenda, as did we. So I apologize for the inconvenience to you. My recommendation would be to save your comments, and on January 22nd, we will be giving this the due and proper time that it deserves. But right now, I just wanted to let anyone know in case they wanted to head home, which would be completely understandable from all of our standpoints. So my understanding is from our council that in order to effectively do this, we need to have a motion to table to a date certain.
Yes, please.
Yes. Is there anyone who'd like to make that motion?
Second.
All right. Yes. No, we did not.
And the date certain would be?
I'm sorry, Michelle, we can't hear you.
My microphone's not. Could you just reference the item P4, what you're actually moving?
Okay.
I move that we grant the continuance to January 22nd for item P4.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So that matter is now tabled until the date certain of January 22nd. So now we're going to move on with the rest of the items on our agenda. The first item, P1, vacation rental license for 710 Madison Street, has been asked to be held in committee by Alderman Fleming. 710 Madison is in the 9th Ward, and so we have indicated to her that we will be holding that in committee. Do we need to make a...
Yeah.
Do we have to say something? Okay.
Well, you should read into the record then.
Okay. All right. So the next item is item P2, ordinance 3.
You need to move to hold it.
Oh, excuse me. We do need to move to hold item.
Move to hold item P1, 710 Madison, till our next meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay, that item is held. Thank you. Next item is P2, ordinance 3018, extension of time for applicant to obtain building permit to construct the planned development at 1815 Oak Avenue. The staff recommends adoption of this ordinance to extend the time for 1 year to the developer of 1815 Oak Street. And in addition, Alderman Braithwaite has recommended suspension of the rules for introduction and action tonight.
Move approval.
Second.
I do have a light on from Alderman Fisk.
Wondering if staff can give us an update on the project.
The developer's here tonight and can give you one as well.
Let's do that before we have the motion. Would you like to come forward, Mr. McLean, and give us an update? Here comes Alderman Braithwaite as well.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here. My name is Michael McLean. I'm with the developer. I'm very happy to give you an update. We are moving along with our plans and programming of the property. We have made great progress with our operating partner and development partner, which is Ridgeline Management, based out of Portland, Oregon, who the council met almost a couple of years ago now. as well as with the construction plans. We're about 75% complete. The building is a very complicated building to design and build, not just because of its triangular location next to the railroad on Ridge Avenue and near a historic building, but also because of the nature of the building. There's 4 floors that have large open dining recreation spaces, which have to be relatively column-free, and we are limited to our height. So typically, when you have column-free space, they get bigger and longer, and the building goes up, and we are working through that within a very difficult and dynamic construction environment where materials are disappearing left and right, going to recovery of disaster relief areas, and we're adjusting in those that direction that we're getting from suppliers and contractors to make sure that this is a really high quality of life within the ordinance that we're given at the moment.
All right, thank you very much. Alderman Fisk? Is that good? All right, thank you. All right, so let's return now to the motion that was made, which has already been seconded, to grant the extension of time, and also, why don't we why don't we vote on that first, and then we'll move to the suspension of the rules. Oh, will that just happen at the council? That happens at the council, correct.
Moved approval.
Right. So it has been moved and seconded. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right. So that. The suspension of the rules will take place at the council level. Okay. All right. Thank you, Alderman Braithwaite. All right. So next is item P3, Ordinance 4018, amending portions of the City of Evanston zoning ordinance to amend the requirements within the C1A zoning district. The Plan Commission recommends no change to these requirements for C1A mixed-use commercial zoning district. I'm going to move introduction, and I'd like to speak on this, if someone would second it.
Second.
All right. This is in response to my reference about C1A, which predominates, it's overwhelmingly, C1A is a zoning district that is overwhelmingly limited to Chicago Avenue in the 3rd Ward and on Howard Street. It is a very dense zoning district that was created in 1992 and then modified in, I think, approximately 2000, 2001. I call it zoning by blunt instrument, and I recommended that some changes be made to the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission Zoning Subcommittee did recommend that 2 changes be made, and then the Plan Commission, for whatever reason, decided not to adopt those. I would like to advocate here at P&D that the 2 changes that the Zoning Committee of the Plan Commission, which actually studied this issue in depth, that we make those 2 changes. And they are, this is really getting into the weeds of zoning, but they are to require that any C1A development have a 12-foot wide sidewalk, which is what we have done along Chicago Avenue, where we have some buildings built within the C1A, and it's almost what we required of 831 Emerson. And then the other change that I would recommend is that the minimum residential lot size in the C1A district be changed from 350 square feet per dwelling unit to 400 feet per dwelling unit, right? So it makes a minor change, but it makes any building built within C1A slightly less dense. So those are my 2 proposals, that we adopt the changes recommended by the Zoning Committee of the Plan Commission.
And I'll second that.
All right. Oh, I've made the motion. Boy, you'd think I hadn't been here for a long time. All right. So is there any discussion or questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Alderman Rainey, you have a question?
Yes. I very much respect your changes, and I remember when you first mentioned this, Alderman Nguyen, and at that time I thought, well, I don't have a problem with that. However, in the meantime, something came up, as things I want to do, and I was at that Plan Commission meeting, and I believe you were out of town when that Plan Commission happened.
Yes, I was out of the
And
country.
I thought, oh, I wish you were here, but you weren't. And then I was out of town, and I meant to talk to you sometime today, and I didn't because I was so far behind and everything. And I am wondering if you and I could show each other the courtesy of holding this in committee until you and I have an opportunity to talk, because it is my intention at some time in the very near future to make a zoning change on Howard Street that would include the C1A, and I would just like some time and an opportunity to talk to
Absolutely.
you before you make this change.
Then I withdraw my motion, and I would move to hold.
Could we just hold? Thank you very much.
All right.
It's very nice doing business with you.
Yes, thank you. Would you like to second that, Ann?
Second.
All right, all right. So this matter is held in committee by the two politest aldermen here on the council, so tonight. All right.
At this moment.
At this moment, yes. All right, so P4 we've disposed of until January 22nd, and now fortunately, we now have time to discuss our discussion items. And we have some very, very good memos here from the staff and the first one is on the Affordable Housing Work Plan. And I'm opening the floor to any discussion about PD1. Would anyone like to comment or acknowledge this or provide any feedback on this? Do you want to take any public comment? Staff, what would you like us to do with this?
Well, this one was for an update, since it had been a couple months since we had provided information on where we were with everything. And the housing staff and I meet pretty regularly to discuss where we are in information gathering, research, and preparation of these topics for the group. So that was just to provide that information, and it's been used as a bit of a guiding document as we've moved forward. So,
Okay, good. All right, then Alderman Fisk.
Johanna, how do you see this working with the committee that's been appointed but not yet met?
the inclusionary housing. So we have set our meeting for next Friday at 7:30 a.m. here in the Aldermanic Library.
I think we're going to try and change that to an evening.
Okay.
An evening time, so that the public can attend.
So when we carried the members.
The public can attend any meeting,
Right,
even at 7:30 in the morning, but it would be more convenient for them to attend in the evening.
We'll look at when we inquired of availability. That was the first available time of all the members. So we'll look at the second most available time. And reschedule. But I think the plan was we've been compiling information on our own ordinance to give everyone a briefing on that, and then some research on ordinances and documents that have been prepared on inclusionary housing for other communities that might have some applicability to Evanston for some initial discussion, and then get some direction from the group once they've digested some of that on where they would like to go on some of these items.
Okay, so you're going to take the discussion that we're having tonight to that committee. Is that?
Yes, there's going to be a little bit of a two-way street here on all of these items, but the idea for the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance Committee would be to bring everybody up to speed. So on the city's ordinance that, as it stands today, that was adopted, and comparable ordinances and information that involves inclusionary housing, since more work has been done on this since we adopted our ordinance.
All right. I have just realized that I did not call citizen comment, and we do have a number of people who are signed up to speak. I know some of the people might have signed up to speak on the 601 Davis matter, and I would recommend that it would be better to hold your comments until we actually are discussing that here at this committee meeting. So I'm going to start with the first name on the list, Tina Payton.
Good evening. Happy New Year to everybody.
Good evening.
I'm Tina Payton, and I wanted to speak about the occupancy limits for the affordable housing and vacation rentals. So I had a few questions. If you change the 3 unrelated people per unit, how will you regulate that? Because right now, you have 3 unrelated people, mostly in the northwestern area, and you don't regulate that now. So how will you regulate it when you allow more, if that's what you're planning on doing? You can see there's houses for rent that say 8 bedrooms for $6,000. That's currently happening, and it's happening a lot in the northwestern area. And obviously, it's not going to be to families that are related. You don't regulate that now. So you should consider that when you're trying to loosen up the rules. Also, for the vacation rentals, who regulates that? You only have 4 inspectors in the city of Evanston. My property gets inspected a lot. I had 14 inspections last year. And are these people inspected for vacation rentals? Do you go and check them for a smoke detector or carbon monoxide detectors? You're handing out vacation rentals a lot, but who's regulating that? Do you send an inspector over to inspect them, their vacation rental? And I'm a rental person too, but I have long-term tenants. These people are circulating a lot and can do a lot of damage in a weekend. And also, are they classified appropriately according to the assessor's office of Cook County? They're supposed to be licensed as a hotel. Is that currently happening with the city of Evanston, and do you regulate that? I would like to know the answers to some of those questions when you address that in the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent questions. Okay, the next person who signed up is Clara Kelly. Yeah.
She's passing.
Okay, all right, thank you. Then we have Carl Klein.
I'm going to pass as well.
Okay, thank you. Then it's Lynn Ewing.
I'm going to hold until January 26th.
All right, thank you. Next is James Skelton. Not here? Okay. Sue Lolbach.
Okay, hello everybody. I wanted to thank you for the ongoing interest and focus on affordable housing as on October 30th. I'm very encouraged about that. And by the way, I'm Sue Lolbach from Connections for the Homeless and Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. One of the things I am concerned about a little bit is the fragmented nature of the work that's being done on the affordable housing right now. There was a good discussion earlier at the Administration Public Works Committee meeting. There's several things that came to this committee. There's other things that are happening through this inclusionary housing committee that's happening. And I find it difficult to see how these all tie together into a cohesive plan for affordable housing. As somebody mentioned during the ANPW meeting earlier, there is only a finite amount of money, and so I think it's very hard for these different groups to talk about how they're going to use that money. But I think the bigger issue is that the money that's available isn't nearly enough to do what's needed. And so Joining Forces recommends that the city get into a real planning process that I don't think needs to start from scratch. We have many, many plans in place, and there's lots of data, but I think we need a plan that really defines what the need is and then defines what the gaps are so that we can start working on how to fill those gaps. I think that all of the steps that you're taking are parts of that puzzle, but I don't think they're going to have the necessary impact without a broader plan and without strategies on how to fill those gaps. So we very, very strongly encourage development of a broader plan that will tie all of these pieces together, and that really become the top priority before we really start diving into all of the developments that are going to be coming forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. All right, the next name I have is Mary Blackwell. Okay. Next is Doug Sharp. Am I reading this correctly?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Doug Sharp. I'm here representing Reclaim Evanston. And I am here tonight to speak against the Vermillion project, and I know that's being deferred, but I think more broadly my comments go to similar topic that Sue Lulbach just spoke about, and I think that's about the process that we've undertaken with regards to housing in Evanston. The city staff has met with the Vermillion Development Group, and they reported on December 15th what Vermillion themselves had admitted to, that compliance with the IHO would render its development project at 601 Davis Street financially infeasible. And I don't understand, given that, why then this proposal is being considered. I think part of this has to do with a larger plan that we need to have in place. If that proposal was adopted, that's going to further weaken the IHO. And there's a growing consensus, and we've got a committee formulated for dealing with the IHO and strengthening it and making it better. The thing that really concerns us in Reclaim is that consideration of this proposal and all the other proposals before it is taking valuable time away from developing a coherent and comprehensive housing plan for Evanston, which is what we want to get to. We're getting nickel and dimed in our time to attend to the broader picture of what we're doing with affordable housing and housing. And I'm sure that you and us have that same goal in mind, to have a coherent plan as to what we're going to do about affordable housing. In light of yet another in a series of proposals for large-scale housing developments, it is our position that the city needs to call a moratorium on consideration of any new large-scale developments until we develop a comprehensive plan in place for housing in Evanston. We will have more to propose on this and say in the weeks to come. We plan to be engaged in this dialogue with you over time, and we will say more about that. But I think at this point, we all need the time and space to figure out what we're doing, and I think a moratorium on the consideration of these proposals would be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, I have Kiara Kelly. Okay. Tricia Connolly. Okay. Is it Doreen Price? Okay. Ivan Hall. Okay. Betty Esther. Is Betty here?
Good evening. The City Council took an important step this past fall in recognizing that housing affordability is a serious and immediate issue in Evanston, deserve a public policy intervention. So I suggest that your affordable housing policy be a human rights one. To that end, I have two recommendations. First, I would urge you to make sure that changes to the inclusionary housing ordinance make it easier for developers to create units for low and moderate income family rather than ease to pay to fee to avoid it. Because this would be a universal rule. This would also ensure that affordable units would open housing opportunity in high-income areas to families with children who care less about micro units. Excuse me. And then make sure that those units remain affordable in perpetuity by having them sold to a community land trust like SEPA or place a restricted deed. It can be done. It has been done around the country in housing market as lucrative as Evanston. Secondly, when it comes to the Housing Trust Fund, prioritize preservation. Use those funds for rental subsidy or grants or low-cost loan to landlord renting to low-income people so they can have access to funds for repairs when needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Brooke Harper. Thank you. And finally, Meg Welsh.
I actually hadn't planned to be here tonight. I was watching the live stream, dropping a kid off to self-defense class, and but what I heard in the Public Works and Administration Committee sort of raised some concerns, and it sounded like there were plans being made for affordable housing, the IHO revisiting it, and we have a committee. And it also sounded like that there was a proposal floated to, basically that let's get agreement that we're going to have the developments fund a voucher program. And, I really think Alderman Rainey's perception that, we need to do something for families and that high rises are not the best place for families is actually a good insight. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't live necessarily downtown. And I have a student at the high school, and I was talking to her about, she has a perception that the high school is segregated. And I asked her, why do you think that is? And she said, well, I don't know that many people of color students because there's not really that many in our neighborhood. And she said, I just think the perception is we don't grow up around each other. We're not, we don't live together. So I really would like to, first of all, caution you, please don't be, rubber stamping. This is, there's been a perception that developments, it's a done deal before they come to the committee. And I just heard something that raises that concern. Like, we're going to fund affordable housing in Evanston by approving the high rises. Well, guess what? We have committees. They're supposed to go through committees. So please, we have a committee that was appointed to study the inclusionary housing ordinance. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. And I would also like to echo what Sue Lobach said and what Reclaim Evanston said. I'm not a part of Reclaim Evanston. Reclaim Evanston is not the only people of, I support a lot of what they do, but they're not the only voice that's speaking in terms of affordable housing. But I really think that we need a moratorium on developments until we get a zoning plan that you guys will actually follow and an inclusion housing ordinance that's a plan. So every development that comes before the committee, you're complaining about all the public comments in other committees. You don't want to hear from us. So get a plan, get a zoning plan, get an inclusionary housing ordinance, and then stick to it, and you won't have to be bothered with our comments.
Thank you. All right, let's return to our discussion now of item. Now we have the next discussion item is PD2 accessory dwelling units to address affordable housing needs. Once again, we have a good memo on this from the city staff. And can we open discussion? Alderman Sufferman, excuse me.
Sure. My one question or comment is, when we first started talking about it, we were talking about it more about renovating existing coach houses and things like that. How do we incentivize people who have regular garages to tear those down and build accessory dwelling units? And what can the city do to make that something that makes sense for a homeowner to do? Is there a permit fee waiver or something? What types of incentives can we provide to make that a reasonable choice for a homeowner to make?
Sure, I can take a stab at that. There have been some examples in other communities, particularly California, that community development departments say, here's basically what you can build. So it's very simple for a homeowner to go forward and say, I can build this. So they're not starting from scratch every time. Here's how big the unit can be. Here's how many parking spaces you might have to provide if you're tearing down a garage. Some departments in California, our initial research shows that they will fast track some of these when they commit to providing those units as affordable to certain income levels. So if we know somebody comes in and says, I would like to tear down my garage and build a accessory dwelling unit over a new garage, we could put it in the code that we would move their permit along a little faster. Certainly, and that's the kind of direction we would look for if council wanted to say, let's waive certain permit fees. We do not generally ever waive permit fees, but if that's something that we say we're incentivizing and encouraging affordable housing, and we can say this would have generated X in permit fees, and that money is better used to get that unit in place faster, that could be of a benefit.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just going to say, I think there are people in my area of the city that would be interested in it, but they don't have existing coach houses that they could upgrade. It would have to be a new construction, and in a lot of instances they would be tearing down a functional accessory building that they have right now.
Alderman Fisk?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody again about when the Kendall Place development it's just being completed now. But all the houses there, I think except for 2, have accessory units in their coach houses. So the developer worked with the homeowners there to provide them. And I think most of them are rented out. Again, I think Ms. Payden brought up a good point that I'm not sure they're all rented out to family members. So we're not enforcing or asking. So I think we need to think this through pretty carefully. It's pretty expensive to build a garage now, and especially if you're going to build a dwelling unit in a garage. And I'd like staff to provide us with a little bit of information. We must have that based on old building permits, the difference in cost between a garage with a dwelling unit above and a garage that is just a garage. So
we can look into that.
Alderman Ravel?
Well, while we're asking staff to provide additional information for us, I'd be interested in staff working on an ordinance that would allow us basically to legitimize the rental of affordable auxiliary dwelling units to non-family members. The hope is that there are some of these coach houses out there that aren't currently being rented to anybody, and so that would add to our affordable housing stock. But that would be a first step, anyways, to make it legal for us to open that up.
And to clarify, did you want a certain affordability level or just open rental?
I'm not clear on how we would enforce how we would make that work with the requiring it to be affordable. At a minimum, I'd like to just see it. See people able to rent out their auxiliary dwelling units. I mean, the other question of affordability, I think, needs a lot more discussion.
Alderman Rainey?
Aren't most of our coach houses in historic districts?
Not necessarily.
No. So do we know how many coach houses we have
I don't know the
that
answer
are
to that.
habitable or that could be habitable?
We can investigate that as well.
There are many of them in the third ward.
I know
a
there
number
are.
of them are rented, but a number of them have been they're no longer in use. There probably are some dwelling units, but they haven't been updated or insulated and things like that. But I know that there are a number of people in the third ward who do have coach houses that they are renting. Not always to family members. So,
Well, and
Yeah.
I think Alderman Ravel's motion is a good one because we should legitimize that, and I see no reason why they couldn't be. But we spend a lot of time talking about renting out coach houses for affordability, but I'm just not so sure how realistic that is, that coach houses are rented to people who need affordable housing. I think that's probably coach houses and affordability. I think it might be a misnomer. So, but it would be good to add to the housing stock. I'm always in favor of that.
I mean, the anecdotal information that I have is that generally the people who rent them are usually a single person who not with a high income. They generally have a very long-term relationship with the people who own it, and it's very convenient for both parties. They're not particularly luxurious places. They're pretty small usually. I agree with Alderman Ravel that I think we should legitimize it, and it's another type of housing in the community that is going. Some of it is just going unused, and we should use it. Okay.
Can I just make one more
Yes, Alderman Fisk.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing to that. I would certainly be in support of that, but I would really want to see that only in houses that are owner-occupied, so that there's some contact for the folks living in the coach houses. A little bit more control.
Okay. Yep. All right. So, Alderman Sefferton.
Sure. I was just going to say, one of the things, the advantages of the coach house, and again, particularly in the area that I represent, is it's an opportunity to create housing in a part of town where there isn't any, and also I think the benefit to the homeowner is important. A lot of people who want to stay in their house as they age would probably be comforted by having the opportunity for the additional income and the additional person living on their property. So I think it's a win-win, and since it would be entirely voluntary, it's probably not a terrible idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Any further discussion or comments for the staff on this one? All right. Okay, let's move on to PD3. This is the residential occupancy limits on affordable housing. Alderman Fisk.
Well, again, I probably should just vacate my seat to Ms. Payton on this one. Sorry, but we're not doing a very good job of either inspections or enforcement on this. And it's of great concern to folks in my ward who have seen houses purchased by developers and single-family houses turned into 2 and 3 flats. What this would mean for the neighbors would be if a house were converted into a 3-flat, you could have 9 people living in under the current ordinance. And if we raised it even by 1 per unit, it would go up to 12 people per house. And that's a huge concern. What I would really like to do, and what I think is missing from this particular item, is a conversation on rooming houses. I mean, we have rooming houses in my ward, some long-time rooming houses that work beautifully. And I think if we're really trying to address not only the needs of students, but also the needs of people as they retire and continue to want to age in place, a rooming house affords a lot of benefit. Because we license them, they're inspected, there are safety considerations, there are ingress and egress requirements, and there's certainly a fee that we get from them, but they really do work, and they're not an imposition on anyone. So that, again, I think is missing from our discussion. I'd like that to be included for when our discussion continues, because I think we can keep the occupancy at 3 and then encourage more attention to be paid to the rooming house licenses. And if necessary, I think we can contact, I'm sure we've got them because they are licensed, but contact rooming house owners and operators in Evanston to come in and at least speak to the committee on their experiences, because I think they're a valuable part of the community. And I see this as a way, again, for folks in my ward who I know want to age in place, the opportunity to have folks come in who want to share their house. So that's my comments.
Yeah, I agree, Alderman Fisk. I think we should, again, have that topic brought forward. You know, it's very interesting to realize that we're sort of operating in reverse from what Evanston did in the 1950s, which was to downzone residential areas and eliminate rooming houses in most residential districts because there was a housing crunch back then, but people didn't want to see. They wanted to push people out further into the suburbs. So,
if I could make just one further comment, I am really concerned about a trend in Evanston. An example is a developer who just recently purchased an apartment building in my ward, a very nice building that had 2-bedroom units in it. They are expanding that unit, all the units in that particular building, to now be 3-bedroom units. And I'm sure that if we made it 4 unrelated, they would expand it to be 4-bedroom units. And that means taking dining rooms or making kitchens smaller or staying within the same footprint of space, but trying to cram more bedrooms in. And I think that's not a good way to go. And I think that, again, should be part of our discussion, that we look at that with staff.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think it will also be interesting to see what the ramifications are of sophomores being required to live on campus at Northwestern, what that does to the housing demand in those areas where we have students cramming into places. Yeah. Is there any other? Alderman Ravel.
I have to say I feel pretty ignorant about rooming houses, so I would appreciate basically a little white paper that describes what is a rooming house, and I guess what we restrict them or we prohibit them in certain of our zoning districts, and what is the history of them here in Evanston, because that would be a very interesting opportunity to explore.
Yeah, we eliminated them in R1 districts back in the 50s or 60s, but we grandfathered everyone in that was in existence at the time. And I know one of the last ones in the 3rd ward was across the street from my house, and I think it existed until the early 80s. You know, so, yeah. But that's my small limited amount of information. I'd like more, though. Yeah. All right. Is any other discussion about this topic for the staff? Staff, do you feel like you have directions?
Yeah, I think we do. Savannah and Sarah have been taking notes, as have I. We'll be prepared to bring back some of this information on the 30th. I'm sorry, the 29th, when we meet as a full council.
Okay, good. All right, so why don't we move on then to vacation rental licenses. That's the last item for discussion, PD4. Lights, anyone? Alderman Rainey?
I realized this was my reference, and at the time I made it, I said that I had read way too much pro and con on this issue, so I was confused and was hoping for some input, and I hadn't heard too much from anybody on it. But one of the things I got to thinking about was, and my point was that investor-owned properties, in other words, where the owner did not reside, should not be allowed to have an Airbnb. But then I got to thinking, and the reason I thought that was because that would interfere with the number of affordable housing units in the city. But then I got to thinking, a place like E2, which is a rental, or 415 Howard, which is a rental, huge number of units. What would it matter to affordable housing if 2 or 3 of those units were, Airbnbs? It wouldn't matter at all. And then we would be penalizing somebody who had a 3-flat or a 5-flat or a 24-unit building. So, that's where it gets confusing and muddies my thinking. So I'm not sure, but I do think the effect Airbnbs have on affordable housing is the fellow, and I keep using him as an example, the guy from Reno or Tahoe who says, woe is me, I'm a very experienced landlord, I live in Lake Tahoe, and I rent out these 3 flats in Judy Fisk's ward, and I have students in there sometime, and he was very confused about when he has leases, and when he doesn't have leases, he wants to do Airbnbs for the whole building, all 3 units. And he says it's very hard for him to rent them out to regular tenants. Well, I don't believe that for a minute. I believe he could rent them out at a regular market rate, but instead he can make more money by doing Airbnbs or to students. So that's an example of where Airbnbs do interfere with family housing at an affordable rate. So I don't know. Maybe we should do a temporary licensing of Airbnbs for a year and see what impact it has. If we get hundreds and hundreds of them, then we should stop and take a look. The license is for a year, and we can always change our mind.
Alderman Ravel, and then I have Alderman Fisk.
Well, I found it very interesting, the paper that we were given in our packet. I had no idea there were so many different aspects to regulating short-term rentals. I guess I'm still in the camp that thinks it'd be nice to have our Airbnbs be owner occupied. But I'm happy to continue the discussion with my colleague Alderman Rainey.
And some cities require it. We wouldn't be the only ones.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I just think I'd like to have a chance to reread this article that was in our packet a little further to know what additional aspects we might want to look at.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Alderman Fisk?
I just wanted to correct the record, Alderman Rainey, that the guy from Lake Tahoe owns property in the 5th ward and not the 1st.
Oh. He probably owns something in your ward, too.
Yes, he probably does, yes. I also think that this is a very interesting topic. It was interesting to me to look at the communities that require owner-occupied, like Madison, Cambridge, and Boulder, and then the communities that don't require it, like Austin. Well, it's Texas. No knock on Texas, but just Texas, and government regulation don't go together. But St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, Minnesota and government regulation do go together. But so I think these, and yet Alexandria, Denver, and Lake Tahoe are all thinking this over. So, I do think this is an issue that we should keep an eye on, and I tend to lean to be in the camp with Alderman Ravel on this. But I agree, Alderman Rainey, that we should probably observe it and see what happens. I can understand why some communities in these places like Alexandria, Virginia, across the river from D.C., they're probably concerned that they're losing a sense of community, or these vacation places are losing a sense of community and the affordability aspect. So, but I think it's something that a whole new entity that are coming into the, now enough of them are arriving that they are having some impact. So I think we need to continue studying it as well. And you're right, Alderman Rainey, right now we have a 1-year license, and we can see what happens, and also watch what these other communities end up doing.
But it was really interesting to read that we're the second largest providers of Airbnb, and that people are making an average of...
And they don't have licenses.
They don't have licenses. 6,000, the average revenue is 6,000 a year. Oh, maybe you were gone when we got that memo. 6,000 a year per Airbnb owner in Evanston.
Oh my! Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I have been on vacation out of the country, and we did stay in Airbnbs. Right. They were lovely.
great.
They were absolutely lovely. Alderman Fisk.
I'd like to ask staff, as sort of an afterthought, could we ask you to discuss with the hotel owners if they have seen any impact on their occupancy rates that they attribute to Airbnb?
Yeah, we can discuss that with them.
That would be a very good question. Yeah. Sorry. All right. So have we completed our discussion, our items?
Move to adjourn.
All right. Is there a second, please? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. We're adjourned, and the council will start at 9. Okay? All right. Thank you all.